Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and I've got John Clauser from Alabama, USA, back on the show. How are you, my mate?
Doing good, mate. It's been a bit.
Yeah, long time no see. Good to have you back on the channel. We
Absolutely.
are doing another rock postcards, and today I have sent an album across the Pacific Ocean, and it's the Angels or Angel City Night Attack. So the Angels, legendary Aussie rock band of the 70s, 80s, 90s and beyond. And the whole premise of this show is John listens to this album with a fresh set of ears, tells us what he thinks of the album, The Angels Night Attack.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was very fortunate to, now for folks who may not know, he's saying the Angels, but this says Angel City. So as to not to confuse the American listeners at the time with the band called Angel, and I think there was actually another band called the Angels, but anyway, that's the American releases gets called Angel City. So I did discover we have a little bit of a different track listing than what you guys have. So, yes. But anyway, the listening experience, wonderful album. That definitely you get that feeling of that workmanlike pub rock. You know, every kid back in the 70s and 80s just dreamed of making in their garage or their basement. You know, this is just wonderful stuff. I was really, in fact, I was so happy with this album, with that, and I was lucky enough to find this at my local store called Seasick Records in one of my trips back, and I've been holding out on you on this one. I also came across this one, and I also came across this one.
Wow! So
I was holding out on you on that one, and I like all three of these. So anyway, this album, this album starts off with Long Night. I think it's a great album opener. Definitely sets the tone. I think the theme of the albums of the song sounds like it's a kind of almost like there's a lot of drug references going on in here. So I'm getting that kind of she was in need of a little more speed, but anyway, I could be wrong on that. But a fantastic opener. I love some of the guitar work in that song. Very emotional. It just kind of has that emotional feel, especially when they get to the twin lead stuff. Living on the Outside, just a super catchy song. Back on You, another catchy song, which I really enjoyed. Fashion and Fame, definitely another AC/DC feel rocker. One thing I noticed, I feel like Joe Elliott must have been listening to these guys a little bit, because he sounds a little like a very young Joe Elliott to me. And some of the songs.
That's an interesting take.
They're very young.
I'll hold that thought. We'll pick that up.
Okay.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Side one ends on the American release, ends with Night Attack. Again, I think it's a great side closer. Love that kind of pulsing rhythm, this almost this paranoia feel. It's like I'm halfway home, but I'm on my way to a night attack kind of thing. I thought it was a great ending. Side A to side A. Side B starts off with City Out of Control with that kind of that lead guitar tremolo grinding. Great opening. I thought it was great. Talk About You had a wonderful punk feel. I thought it was AC/DC goes punk. I really enjoyed that one. Running Wild, another fun groove. Nothing to Win. I thought it was another rousing stomping of a song. Storm the Bastille, great album closer. Love that march beat to it. A little bit of a history lesson almost of sorts. It's just all three of these albums, Face to Face and Darkroom, all three of them, in my opinion, they were just so much fun to listen to in the car, in my room here. I can just imagine what these guys were like in concert. I imagine these guys were quite the spectacle to watch. But would love to hear more at some point as I can find them. But yes, great stuff. Great stuff. I would have loved this when I was junior high age, because I was coming out of AC/DC around 7th, 8th grade. So I could have easily picked up on this and would have ran right with it.
Yeah, they're a real air guitar type of band. You can imagine just getting the tennis racket, or in Australia, the cricket bat, and just sitting in your bedroom and just playing to it. But
yeah,
look, this band is legendary. I've seen them quite a few times, and they're easily one of the best live bands I've ever seen. They originally started in the early 70s as the Moonshine Jug and String Band. They're a jug band.
Oh, yes, so, that would make sense.
Then it evolved into the Keystone Angels, and then it became the Angels as they're known in Australia. And you are right, they had to change the name to Angel City, or there was an album called Beyond Salvation in the early 90s where they were called the Angels from Angel City, which is even more confusing. I kind of wish that they retained the name The Angels, and it was to distinguish against the band called Angel. I think there was enough differentiation that they didn't need to change the name of the band.
Oh, yeah.
But Doc Neeson, frontman, one of the most captivating frontmen you'll ever see. He's just... So when they're on stage, basically the lighting was very dark, and they would have the spotlighting that they would have on the band would be on their eyes. See? So it wasn't
like that.
Yeah, not very
not quite
bright.
Like that, maybe.
And you had the two Brewster brothers. So you had Rick Brewster, who's on lead. He'd be playing the guitar and he'd have dark sunglasses and he would not move. Oh, he'd move his hands and do these really tasty licks, but he wouldn't move. He'd just stay stationary. Then you have John Brewster, also on guitar. So they're the brothers. Chris Bailey on bass, and then Brent Eccles on drums. Now, this album was their second on the Epic label. So originally they were part of the Vander and Young family on the Alberts label. Face to Face did huge business in Australia. They were kind of promoted very heavily by the Young brothers. They really liked them, but they decided to leave the Albert fold and go onto the Epic label because they thought that was probably the path that they needed to take to get a bit more international success. This was the second album. They did a tour with Triumph. It was a disaster. It was a bit of a mismatch, and the Triumph audiences didn't like them. They also supported the Kinks for a period of time, and they got booted off the tour because the Angels were so good. The Angels would be playing, I think it was a story, they played Madison Square Gardens. The audience wanted an encore. After that show, the Kinks booted them. So getting back to when they're on stage, Doc Neeson is just basically full of drama. He was he liked to bring sort of theatrical elements into it. So any song that he was doing, he'd be very expressionistic. He'd be running up the stage, climbing the Marshall stacks. He'd be just acting like a complete banshee from one end of the stage to the other, complete lunacy. But the Angels had intelligence, because you look at their lyrics, and I think Martin Popoff best describes it. It's like AC/DC, faster, but with better lyrics, 30% better lyrics. Because if you look at the lyrics, they're tales from the streets, they're social observation.
Yes.
They're little stories and tales, full of drama, full of emotion. They are the thinking man's hard rock band.
Yes.
So they're kind of a triple threat. Great live, great in the studio, thinking man's hard rock metal. They did have their fans in America, little pockets. In the Seattle scene, Seattle, they were quite popular. And a certain guy called Duff and a certain guy called Slash were very, very influenced by them. And that Guns N' Roses Appetite for Destruction, you read a lot of interviews, they used to cite, what are your influences? Rose Tattoo, The Angels, amongst other influences as well. So this album that you have put up did go into the crew, you know, into the Guns N' Roses and into the metal community. Musicians knew about them. It just, they got stiffed by the record company label. They had a bad tour, didn't get the necessary promotion, the usual story. They just didn't get through. And we've covered this so many times. Cold Chisel, Dragon, even Rose Tattoo. You know, maybe if they had the right promotion, they would have been as big as Guns N' Roses, because they certainly had a lot going for them. They may be a little bit older, but, you know, the stagecraft, the videos, they had the whole package there, John, and they should have been much, much bigger.
Yeah.
How would you describe the sound to your ears?
I think I would agree with how Martin described it. A faster AC/DC with better lyrics. You know, maybe, you know, and that's saying something with Bond's lyrics, because I liked a lot of Bond's lyrics.
Street poetry. It's like
definitely street poetry. But I would definitely say, yeah, I'd say like a punky AC/DC pub rock, garage rock, basement rock band that you always wanted to play in. You know, that's really what it, I think is really what it comes down to. That's about the best way I could describe it.
Yeah.
But,
well, they were influenced, the Brewster brothers were influenced by The Clash. So they heard The Clash with that really spiky, punky guitar, and that sort of let off a light bulb. Let's transpose that sort of sound into a hard rock environment. Now, a little bit of a story about Night Attack, the story behind the album title. They played a concert in front of the Opera House. I think it might have been New Year's Eve. These, in Australia, they used to have a lot of these big concerts, free concerts in front of the Opera House, like Concert of the Decade, New Year's Eve concert. It was very rowdy. People could drink. And what happened on that night, where I think the Angels might have been headlining, somebody threw a beer can and it hit Doc Neeson in the head. Now, the problem is beer cans in those days were not aluminium. They were steel. So you had a steel beer can and it was riveted, and it probably had a lot of beer in it, and it knocked him out cold.
Wow.
So they wrote a song about it, named the album, and it was based on that, called Night Attack.
Wow.
Crowds were pretty rough in that day. I mean, it's not as if they weren't liked. It's just that you always get some lair or some idiot in the concert that was spoiling it for everyone. And then over time, they had a lot of inquiries, make it alcohol free, a lot more policing, and trying to control that. But yeah, that's the story behind that. But
interesting.
Yeah, look, absolutely, it's just crunchy, riveting rock. A lot of these songs made the charts. They charted as singles, and people would be actually playing this in their discotheques or in the clubs. Yes, it is pub rock, but it's pub rock with a lot of edge. So do you have any theories why it may not have translated into America? Do you think it may have been too punky, or for the metal crowd, or too, I don't know.
So maybe you get that kind of sound with that bluesy sound, but then you get the punk edge to it. I don't know. You know, it's hard to really say. You know, I really don't know why it didn't, why this one didn't translate, because you think it should.
Now, Doc Neeson's vocals, you sort of said a little bit like Joe Elliott. So he hasn't got the greatest voice, but it's very expressionist. And I love it where he does these little spoken bits, because Doc Neeson is an immigrant from Ireland, and he's got that sort of you can hear that brogue vocals and when he speaks.
Okay.
And yeah, was there a particular song or particular album?
For me, I was thinking like High and Dry era,
Right.
like not when he's like really, not when Joe's like really screeching high, but I'm thinking like, like maybe on like the intro verses of like Let It Go, for example. Some of the lower register stuff where he's singing with that attitude and not quite like the Photograph or Foolin' or the higher register stuff that we would hear from them later. It's kind of where I was thinking with the Joe Elliott kind of feel. That's, or at least that's where my eyes were, or my ears were picking up. But I don't know, or like I said, maybe Joe Elliott was hearing him, and it just happened to work. But the Irish connection kind of makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah,
now that you mention it.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the great acts in Australia came from either Ireland, Scotland, or England. They immigrated across, like AC/DC, even Little River Band with Glenn Shorrock. I'm just off the top of my head, all these great bands, a lot of them, they have their origins from the UK or from Ireland. I get a bit sad. I get a little bit, when I think about the Angels, how they could have been bigger, but I get a little bit more sad to think that it sort of relates to a time in music which is gone, and the pub rock scene, which is long gone.
Yeah.
And I mean, the expression pub rock, I really think that Australia probably created it. There were bands like Billy Thorpe and the Aztecs. I'm not sure if you've heard of Billy Thorpe, but check him out.
I know Billy Thorpe. Children of the Sun.
Yes. Well, he was in a band called the Aztecs. And the thing is that you had a lot of these bands that would play the pubs, and there was a live gig scene in Australia where you could see a band every night of the week. Now, you look at the papers now, you'd be struggling to find one on Saturday night, and only in certain venues in the inner cities. But every suburb would have a beer barn, a club. They'd be pumping out music 7 days a week. It was just a great fertile time of music, and a lot of it was pub rock. And the audiences that would be listening to this were quite rowdy. They'd have their 40 schooners, they'd be, half cut, and they would want bloody, hard hitting music. So the bands that would play, unless they wanted to get bottles up on stage, think of the Blues Brothers movie, the scene where they're playing.
Yep.
That was a bit like the pubs. If you wanted to do that, you had to put on a show, play louder, play faster, put something outrageous to make them to grab their attention. This is the fertile ground of Australian pub rock that the Angels came out of, and then brought it into that live scene.
Right.
So it's a connection between the band and the audience. And I have not seen many bands that had the connection between the Angels and the audience, or Doc Neeson and the audience. It was just like that.
So what do you think?
Yeah, go on.
I was going to ask, so what do you think happened that every night of the week you could see a band? When and why did you think that happened, and just why it just dried up?
A couple of things. Licensing laws changed. So people live next door to pubs, made complaints about the noise, even though the pub may have been there since 1920 or 1910. You had people moving in, making complaints to the council, so they started doing noise restrictions. And then the pubs found it was more profitable to put poker machines in the pubs. More poker machines in the pubs, less space for the bands to play. Looking at the balance sheet, John, it's more profitable to have poker machines than a band.
Wow.
Where the pub would only be getting the takings of the, behind the bar.
Yeah.
And then getting DJs in, playing turntable music, shifting tastes in music. It was a culmination of things. But It's an era of music that I have really, really fond memories, and they were just part of the thick of it. And it's kind of sad. You do see these little pockets of revivals in Sydney with the live scene and more, occasionally a couple of hotels and band rooms do take on more live music, but it's never going to be like it was in the 70s and 80s, and the Angels were part of that. Look at me go. I've gone into
I love it.
down a road, but I think it's important that I tell the viewers about the environment of how bands like this came out. And, I think, I don't know if that was like big that sort of scene was in America, probably in New York or LA. You had the club scene. That's
probably
how
New
I
York
would
and LA.
relate it.
Yeah. New York and LA, but, and I was obviously too young to have been a part of any of that, and I did live in those areas, but I was too young to have experienced that. But, you could hear all the stories and you could pick up the music, but man, to have been alive and just have been old enough to have been able to have really experienced that kind of stuff. Yeah, I would love to have done this, and hearing what you're talking about makes me really wish I could have done that. But because it just sounds like a wonderful time.
Yes, it was. And, I was able and lucky to experience it in the late 80s. And there were all these little subgenres. You'd have the metal scene, the punk scene, the sort of pub rock scene, new wave. But everyone just went out and just to enjoy the music. And the Angels were definitely part of that, a part of Australian culture. But, look, I think their music lives on. It's timeless and crunchy. I'm not sure that's their best album, but the song track listing, which is a combination of quite a couple of albums, is very strong. I think for viewers, I would recommend Face to Face, which is outstanding, which is was produced by Vander and Young on the Alberts label. And I would also recommend Live Line, which is their it's kind of their greatest hits but played live, and that's where they're at their best. And you can sort of hear them in all their glory, their crunchy glory. But if you like crunchy rock and roll with a bit of edge, bit of punk, the Angels are definitely the band. Any other final words that you want to say about the Angels, or any songs that pick a couple of songs that the viewers need to listen to, and that will be their entry point?
Well, I would definitely go if it was just from this album. I would definitely say Long Night or Night Attack or Storm the Bastille. Every song on here is just so catchy. I would be singing along with the choruses in no time. You just pick up on it that quickly. So I would really recommend anything from that. If we're going to go into older stuff, like say this Face to Face album, I haven't had a chance to listen to quite as much of this one, but I don't know. Take a Long Line I thought was pretty good.
Take a Long Line's fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, that was a great song. Like I said, I haven't had as much time to spend with this and Dark Room as much. So, but
could you put up Dark Room again, because that's got a different sort of cover. Those eyes, it looks like a horror movie. It reminds me of that movie Patrick, an Aussie horror. I'll actually put the poster of Patrick up, but that's Doc Neeson's eyes. But the Dark Room in Australia, which I will put up, is a black and white album cover, and I'm not sure if I like that version of the Dark Eyes album cover. And do you want to put up the other? Well, you might as well go back to the other album cover. No, the Night Attack. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of the laser. What is it? Laser Blast or something?
Yeah, like a big Yeah, that's about the best way, because I think the Australian version is like the background's in black.
Obviously, no, black and red.
Black and red. Okay,
put that up. So
yeah. So, So, the only thing I will say is I feel like Whoever sequenced this American version, I really liked it because I did try to look at the Australian version, and I'm not sure I would have liked that sequence quite so well. I guess I just would have needed to hear it. But how this was sequenced to me was bang on. So,
well, it's like a little mini greatest hits, isn't it? Just a couple of albums and just put it into sequence.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess your entry point, you're used to it. But look, it doesn't matter which order. At the end of the day, they're all great tracks.
They're great albums. They're
not much filler. It's I really heartily recommend it.
Yep. I was just gonna say, I'm gonna try to look for some more and see what I can get my hands on and go from there.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
As always, John, always a pleasure to have you on the channel and
absolutely
put a bit more Aussie rock across the Pacific Ocean. You can see John on my music corner. He has a lot of wonderful shows. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Tell us what you think of the Angels or Angel City. Maybe share some recollections of some concerts or your favorite album, your favorite song. But one thing's for sure, me and John will be doing a show real soon. Cheers.
Yes.